everyone. I think we're going to be getting started now. My name is Kealohi. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm standing here today so that we can do a land acknowledgement and recognize that the area that we're on is Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and 48 other tribes land originally. And so we want to recognize this so we can keep uplifting the voices of Indigenous people in the community and ensure that their voices are heard, and that we continue to do the work that Indigenous people need for us to stand in solidarity with them. This will be something that we'll be doing at every single training, and so I hope that moving forward, maybe people who are attending this training more consistently can be doing the land acknowledgement as well, and maybe we could even share different ways that we can uplift the 48 or 48 plus different tribes that have been around in this area. Thank you.
Oh, my God, yes.
Oh, yes. And now I'm going to hand it off to Indira so we can talk about the CLC.
Gracias. Buenas tardes. Good evening, everyone. My name is Indira Guzman, and I'm here with the Community Language Co-op, and I'm also a Sheridan resident. And today, the organizers of this event have made a commitment to language justice. What that means is that we want everyone to participate and engage in the language of our hearts. So we are going to be using Zoom interpretation. If you are in person, I'm going to ask you to please take your phone and go ahead and log into the meeting, select mute your microphone and select the language that you prefer to engage in. For us who are on Zoom, make sure that you, when we turn on interpretation, that you select the language. And then I'm going to ask everyone who is at the Zoom meeting to make sure that they're close to the computer when they speak, or if I cannot hear you, I may type it in the chat so that you could repeat some sentences. It's a little difficult to interpret when not everyone is on a microphone. So let's just keep that in mind. Everybody else can keep ourselves muted unless you are talking. And that way we can make sure that everyone can hear everything. I'm going to repeat this en español. Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Indira y estoy aquí con la Community Language Co-op y también soy residente de Sheridan. Y esta tarde los organizadores de este evento han hecho un compromiso a la justicia del lenguaje. Ahora, para poder escuchar la interpretación, si están en personas, vamos a pedir que se metan a Zoom. Si no están en persona, vamos a pedir que usen el Zoom regularmente como normalmente lo hacen. Si están en persona, se meten a Zoom, silencian su micrófono y seleccionan el idioma en el que quieran participar. Si estamos batallando mucho con esto, me avisan y me arranco rápidamente allá a donde están ustedes en personas para que podamos asegurarnos que esto funcione. Let's go ahead and turn on interpretation. If you click on the interpretation icon, whoever the host is, or whoever's on the computer for the host, and then add my name as a Spanish interpreter. And then you could click on start. Gracias. I'll do a quick sound check just to make sure everybody can hear me.
Thank you, Indira, for getting us started with the language interpretation. We really appreciate your time here. Now we'll be handing it out to Danny, who is going to be talking a little bit about budgeting. So.
Good evening, everybody. I want to thank you guys for bearing with me for not able to be there in person. I had a obligation in Southern Colorado and went a little later than I was hoping. So I'm en route, but I'm still just south of Colorado Springs. So I pulled over, but I have everything I need. And I want to thank you again for rising to this occasion and being willing to step up and take on these leadership positions that we need more of our community to be involved. So I am not a financial expert or anything, but I have a lot of experience because of my work with the Sisters of Color for, I think it's been 14 years now. And I became the grant manager, and as the manager, I have to keep track of a lot of the money that's coming in and out of the company. And so I have to, I've learned to develop, and I've had brought in a few examples of different budgets. I've also, because of my role at the school board, I was appointed as the treasurer, and I have an opportunity, of course, to interact with the chief financial officer, Liz Duncan there, and able to monitor the spending that goes on over there. The challenging thing about budgets is that you're never, it's different than like your home finances. Like keeping track of your own money is sort of the after the fact, because you get money and then maybe you make a budget of how you're going to spend it, and then you see what's left and then you save some, hopefully. But typically we can't do that. But in larger agency budgeting too, we also forecast, we project based on what we spent before. And then we also have like money that's coming in, like promised to come in. So we kind of keep track of some of those things, and they can vary and they can change during the process. One thing I'll mention too that was new, I was becoming a board member, I received some campaign finance money from the school association, the union association. And I did what I was told is correct to do. I filed a Secretary of the State office. I filed a campaign finance organization because that was the way that I could receive the money, and I have to report that to the state. So I opened up an account in the state where I had to report any money that I receive for campaigning. And there's very specific laws about your campaign and political contributions. And of course, they're very important for higher levels of government, because corporations now, they donate lots and lots of money to campaigns for politicians. Of course, on the local level, I was talking about $300 was all I got. And the sad part was I did not realize that once I spent the money, I reported it over, I should have closed my campaign finance team, account, because I didn't have any money in it. But I left the account open. And so every quarter, every 3 months, I would have to file to the state and tell them, this is how much, which was always zero. I zero money in, zero money out. Well, they also have a rule about filing. You have to file those every quarter. And so as the years went by into my second, third year, I forgot to file the form. And I had a different email that I didn't use. And then the state informed me, you missed filing that. So I didn't see the message because it was on the other email from the school board that I don't look at as much. And so a long time went by and they charged $50 fine every day. And it went on and on for almost 3 months, because then when I saw the next quarter report, I filled it out And then now I owe the state like $4,000 for fines because of a campaign, because of my campaign filing and being late. So I had $300 and now I owe $4,000. But I'm trying to meet with them. I have an appointment set up to try to negotiate whether I can remove some of those things. But it's a lesson about how finance, the budgeting. There's a lot of things that you have to make sure that you keep a track of, and that you continue, especially for anybody that knows who has their own business. If you have employees that work for you, you have to deduct money from their check. You have to spend those wage withholding monies into the state, into the federal government, and those reports, if you are late, they will fine you. If anybody remembers, up the hill on Dartmouth, the restaurant by the Little Caesars, there was for a second there was the burritos store, the one guys that were Chubby's Burritos. They opened up and they got shut down because they didn't pay their taxes. So those are things that you got to keep in track of. And most businesses, they hire an accountant to do those and take care of those things. So what I want to do is start out. I want to show you this easy, like a annual budget form that, oops, wait, not that one. It is this one. Here we go. This one is actually the profit and loss. So this is sort of at the end of the year, the beginning of the year to the end of the year. And this is a sort of a report form that will show in revenues, contributions that came in, and where the different, as you see, contribution, foundation, grants, non-government grants, earned incomes, rental incomes. So you track all of the money that comes in. There's some of it is not restricted. Some of it has a temporary restriction because different projects we have, they tell us you have to spend this money on these specific things. Some things are permanently, like this was a rental security deposit. So our security deposit for the building, we can't spend that money. That's permanently restricted. And so then when you go down below, we put the list of the expenses and how those expenses were doled out. Most of it spent under the unrestricted, but then on the restricted amounts. And of course, usually your salaries, for our company, salaries are the more of the majority of the spending. And we do incorporate in our spending what we pay to subcontractors too. When we do sort of an annual, I want to pull up this one, which is, nope, that's the same one. Hope I didn't pull up the same one 10 times. Yeah, this one, now this is sort of an annual, this was the projection budget. And so this one is one that when we send in to write a grant or ask for money, they want to know like how much money that we have so that they can feel comfortable that we're going to be able to handle the amount of money that they give out. And so this is like a list of where expenses are on the left, and the income is on the left. And then what we're going to expect to spend rolls down to the total, what we believe will be the total cost. And then on the right, we have the amounts of money that we are secured, that we feel are definitely going to get. Can you guys see all of the numbers as well? Yeah. And then we see where the money comes from, the state, from the federal, from the foundations. But then we also have the total of actually approved, and then we have other planned income that we propose we will get in. And then we have those other totals. And generally when we do sort of a full sheet with a budget, we try to sort of balance it where we see the total expense is about 476, and then the total income is just a little over, which is generally like people like to see when they're looking at how well you do. If they're going to loan you money, they like to see that you are bringing in a little more than you're spending out, because if you're bringing in less than what you spend out, then you're more of a risk for them to loan you money. Although it's kind of goes backwards, because you say, well, if I don't get the money, then if I give me the money, then I will not have such a loss, you know? So some of those things are challenging to navigate. Then during the process of the year, also what we end up doing is we have to keep track of the different, oops, this is the wrong one. Keeping track of the different projects that we have. So this is what we call an operational budget, where this one shows, this one is a sort of a split, because it carries, we have 2019 and 2020 up in the corner, if you see, because there are some projects that end and they start in 2019, go into 2020. And so those can be confusing, because the state generally budgets everything from July 1st to June 30th. But our company budgets from January 1st to December at the end of the year. And so then the numbers become a little different, because you're carrying the amounts from the 6 months from the other year forward. And so in this sort of operational budget, it kind of, we break down different columns for every contract that we have and different foundations. And then down below, we'll list out, here are the jobs, the roles of the staff members, the amounts that we budgeted for them, the amount that is secured. So this will help us to understand we need to raise more money to cover these salaries. And then we can see which different contract has what amounts that help to secure this amount. So if I have formulas on these spreadsheets like this one, where the sum of this will add up all of the amounts that were listed across there. So, whoops, let me not change that. And then of course we go as well down into other costs of taxes, insurances, compensations, money that we might pay for a grant writer, consultants, monies that we pay to our promotoras, and monies that are for incentives, for the meals, the mileage, all of these items. So that when we arrive at the bottom, what our total expenses is going to be. And then we see that we're a little bit short. So we keep track of this internally. We don't really show this to the funders, because then they're going to say, oh, you're operating in the red. You know, you're at a risk. But really our annual budget shows that what we expect to get and what we have secured is showing that we actually do have enough money. And of course, during this year, we'll end up securing more funds. So for example, let me bring across, like, if we look at, then in each, I put a different tab for every different contract. So this contract, and then each month we keep records of how much money was spent in that budget, and then the individual items within it, you know? So for example, this one for the Office Health Equity grant that we did in Sheridan, that is the amount of money for our staff members. The fringe amounts include our health insurance, taxes, the amounts that for the promotoras, and then the amounts that was paid out to them every month. So at the end of the month, at the end of the year, we can see the totals, and these all accrue as we're going. So this ended June of 2020. So this was already last year, you know. And then we have these little differences where we paid a little more than what we budgeted. So then we are able to revise, and we're able to contact the people that we have our contracts with and say, well, we need to adjust this amount a little bit here, this amount a little bit there. And we look at all of the office supplies, the printers and meetings and meals expenses. And then we look at the end of the year and say, well, we had a little extra money left over, we spent a little extra money here. And then the next year we can take those considerations so that we can try to arrive at a budget what we will spend for the following year a little closer to what is really being spent. And of course, sometimes you're left with 80 cents over or something, but in actuality. And with different contracts, it's different. You know, some of the contracts, the state will say, if you didn't spend this money, you just lose it. You know, sometimes you can call, especially when we had COVID, for example, we said, well, we're doing less work, so we're not working as much, we're not spending as much, we didn't get to do meetings and spend money on food. So they allow us to move those monies to other areas. And the key is just keeping that communication open, talking to the members that you're working with, so that they're able to approve any changes that you make to the budgets, things like that.
Hey, Danny, really quickly, there's a message in the chat that was asking, what does it mean to be in the red?
In the red means that you're sort of, like I said, the expenses is more than what the income, what is incoming. So that would mean that if you look at all the costs of what you pay for rent, for supplies, for your employees, for your materials and your fringe costs and everything, and then that total amount, if that is greater than what the amount that you have approved of what is been allocated to you and promised to you through contracts, then if you're negative, if your expenses is more than your income, then you're operating in the red. And then that means you need to, because those budget is a forecast for by the end of the year. And so that gives you some time to realize, oh, I need to increase some money. I need to find another place to bring in more money. And lots of nonprofits do that. And of course, that's why they end up having fundraisers, capital campaigns, different bake sales at the school. You know, sometimes they'll do that where the teachers will have something where they raise some funds and they help get more supplies and things for maybe for when the school sports team wants to buy new uniforms. If that's not in the budget, they'll do activities like you guys probably remember going up to, all the parents will buy the tickets and go up to Central City and have fun, but all the money that they raise will go to help. It'll be a fundraiser, you know. Does that make sense? What other kind of questions does this kind of bring up to people, and how does people feel about these kinds of financial expectations and obligations?
Hey, Danny, it's Tamar. I was just curious from like the standpoint of somebody who wants to run a campaign, like what was your budget and how did you go about like getting funding for your campaign?
So campaign was a new thing for me. So and what I also learned, like I mentioned the story about how I got this campaign finance registration through the state. Well, I should have closed it, because once I was spent all my money, you don't need to keep that open all the time. And in fact, if you're campaigning and you're going to spend your own money, then you don't even need to open up a campaign finance agent or account. So most of the other board members, they haven't either. And I was approached by the school. So the school teachers, they wanted to support us and they wanted to support. So they offered me the money, and that's what I used that money to buy yard signs for people's yards that said vote for Danny. And I used it to buy the flyers that we took to the door to door and those types of things. So that all that money went on the materials. I kept the receipts And then I submitted all of that, and I keep the receipts in my own personal lockers, but I also take electronic copies of them. The state never really asked to see the receipts because it's a small amount, but I'm sure for a lot of, the mayors, the state senators and things like that, where they get thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, they have to keep a lot better records for that. Now local government, and like I said, most of the other candidates, they don't even have campaign financing accounts because it's a very small amount of money. And if anybody gives you like less than $50, you don't even have to report that, That's the key thing, is that whether you're getting it from a lump sum or if you're getting small amounts from a bunch of people,
Thanks for letting us know on that. So from the budgets that you showed us, a lot of it was with Sisters of Color. And so your experience with elections and budgets was mostly during campaigns. Did you have to keep up these spreadsheets and keep up with budgets throughout the year as well?
Well, with campaign budget, I don't have a budget because I only received the money the very first time back in 2017. So I keep the records. I have if anyone asks to see the receipts for how I spent the $300, I can show them that. But if I was getting more money in during that time, I would have to keep a record of that. As far as on the school board, the school administrators themselves, they keep track of the budgets. They send me copies and I get a look at them. That way, if I have any questions during board meetings, I can ask questions. And as the treasurer, I can sit down with the chief financial officer and make an appointment, sit down and ask them to explain any expending and any budget questions about. And the school's financial records and their budgets are a lot more similar like that. You've seen that operational budget. They have separate pages for not only every school has its own budget, but then within the school, there are certain grants, there's certain programs, and each of those have their own budgets. So it's pretty complicated how the school system's budgets. When I first started and becoming involved in political, somebody thought I should run for the city, and I decided I didn't want to do the city. I'd rather work for the school because the school seems to me like it's smaller, like running a city is bigger and a lot more to deal with. And the surprising thing was when I became involved was the school actually has more money than the city does. And the school employs more people and the school owns more property than the city does. So I was surprised to find that out.
Does
What are some other questions?
Hey, Danny, it's Aunt Tally. I can.
You can come up here.
Okay.
Close to that microphone, huh?
Figuring it out. Hey, so I'm a teacher in Sheridan, and I've been active in the union a long time. And I don't know if you remember, but we put you through interviews, the union, and it's a very formal, kind of important process that is established by the state union. And actually, it was the first time that I'd seen it done well and right. And I know Indira went through it also, where all the candidates, all of them, even the ones who were not traditionally friends of teachers, came and interviewed with us because they wanted our recommendation. And the money was part of it. Danny and I saw Indira put in the chat also that Indira had the same problem. So you guys, I'm on it. We'll make sure that moving forward, that we have all the information candidates need who receive money from CEA on, well, okay, so the teacher union is Sheridan Educators Association. And SEA, right. And we're very strong in Sheridan and have been historically. And so this last election, there were quite a few, I don't know how many of the races were, there were 2 people running, at least 3, I think. Anyway, and so whomever we recommend after the interviews that we recommend, then they receive the $300. And we'll make sure that we communicate much better moving forward about the after you're elected or not. So sorry, on behalf of the union, it sounds like what a mess over a very small amount of money. But in Sheridan, $300 can go a long way, in theory, that some candidates find it really valuable. And I think everybody wanted our recommendation. So just wanted to clear that up. We can, Tamara and I were just talking about at some point maybe doing more information on that. And I'm happy to. Okay. Thank you, Danny. Looking good.
I don't have any ill feelings about the union at all because of that. Like I said, it was a learning experience for myself, and I'm sure just as Indira had it forgiven, I know once I speak to them and clear it up, it'll get wiped off too.
And I don't know if there's anything we can do. Let me know as far as the Front Range Unit serve as our district support. And then, of course, the Co-Educators Association. I imagine we've got attorneys. Let us know if there's any problem. All right.
Well, this November, it will be my re-election. And I don't really need any campaign money because I still have all my yard signs.
Is that what you spent your money on? Did you spend it on your signs?
They're on the yard signs and the flyers. So
Okay. All right. Thanks for letting me fill that in.
Yeah,
So
thank you so much for sharing
yeah.
about that. So if there's no more questions or comments, we'd like to move on to the next session.
does anybody have any like fears or feel like money and finances are makes them nervous? Want to talk about that, or everybody feels like they feel good, they want to get more money?
I do have a question. I guess I'm thinking about money and campaigning on a really big scale, which of course isn't always the case with local elections. But when people do donate a lot of money, usually they want the person to act in their interests once they're elected to that position. Do you think that's something that you see also with local elections, or not as much?
No, it's something that people want, but there is no there's no contract, no obligation. Just because somebody gives you the finance money, basically it's that if they give you the money and say, I'm going to give you this money because I want you to do this, and if you don't do it, they can't come and make you give the money back, but they just won't give it to you the next time. So that's what kind of inspires politicians to act on behalf of big business, is they know that if they don't, the big businesses will stop giving them the money. They can't punish them for not. And it's clear to notice that, like, for example, nonprofits are filed under different codes. So Sisters of Color is a 501c3. 501c3 is your most basic common nonprofit. And there's a rule, there's a law in the federal government that if they spend money on a campaign, on any political things, then they violate their law, they can lose their status. So Sisters of Color could never pay for my yard signs. They could never pay for the flyers that I used if I tried to go, because for running for political office, they would be, but there's other companies like Colorado People's Action, they're a 501c4, I think. And so they are specifically designed for the purpose of lobbying politicians and doing campaign issues. But then they have other restrictions where they can't receive money, for instance, to do community developing or to do, health related work that we do. So So the nonprofit organizations, they're kind of, a lot of people think, oh, they're great. They don't have taxes or something. But in reality, there's a lot more restriction that goes along with being a nonprofit than there is with the profit. Or because, for example, most contracts that we get, the monies that we get will specifically say, you cannot use this money to buy any land, to improve your properties, or to do any work like buy equipment or buy vehicles or anything like that. So the nonprofit industry, in a way, it kind of burdens the community developing that we need. We need community groups that are helping to build housing, or helping to do those, help people develop their wealth. But the nonprofit is specifically designed to prevent that. So you cannot get ahead, and you can't really help, you can only help your community so far with a nonprofit. Having a for-profit business gives you then more freedom with how you spend your money, what you can spend your money on. And Sisters of Color has done a little bit of being able to sort of, we own some property, so we are able to use that as an investment, and we're able to collect money as rents. And then those rents, those are monies that are not from the contracts, not from the grants, and those are monies that we can use for other things. So people they have to learn the rules in order to understand whether, and then you have to document exactly where all that money, restricted, unrestricted, how it's spent, and of course keeping track of that, because we certainly get audited every year. The state give us the money, so then they want to see receipts, everything we spent, and they want to see how it was spent down, and we have to provide all of that information. So
Awesome. Thank you so much, Danny, for giving us a great lesson in budgeting. We're going to keep moving forward with Naomi so we can learn a little bit about technology. If anyone has any more questions for Danny, just go ahead and send them directly. And if you have any more questions and you want to see these documents, we'll be able to provide them in a follow-up email after this. So,
and I apologize, I'm going to jump off because I want to get home.
Oh,
See you guys soon, though. Chikateawi.
Take care.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Can everybody hear me okay on Zoom? No. Yes, okay.
Throw a little thumbs up if you can hear.
Awesome. Okay, so to get started, my name is Nahomy Bello, and I am the administrative assistant for Sharing Rising Together for Equity. And today I will be talking to you guys about technology, and I will be giving y'all a technology intro. I will be going over 6 different things today. And the first thing on the list today is basic computer operation. So basically the hardware and the operating system. All right. So the Sheridan City Council and the Sheridan School Board, they both use computers for communication and for collaboration. So city council members and school board members will each be given a laptop, and they will keep it for as long as they are either on the council or on the school board. Most organizations, including the city council and the school board, they will be using PC computer systems. So what that means is that no more Apple. So if you guys are used to Apple, be prepared to make that transition into PC, and you will be using a version of Windows as the operating system for the computer. If you are not familiar with computers, do not let that stop you. There are lots of ways to try it out and to learn new things. For example, there are free classes at the library, and then there's a lot of people within our community that are kind of tech savvy, and especially teenagers. They have a lot of experience, so feel free to reach out. And if you prefer to not use a computer, like if that's really your biggest preference, it is possible to use paper instead. The city and the school districts can print these out for you guys. All right, the next thing on our list is email. So email is used a lot by the school board and by the city council. It's basically just another way to communicate with each other. And you can send written messages back and forth, and you can share electronic documents and website links to your email. The city council members and the school board members will be given an account for as long as they're on the school board or the city council, and that will become their official email account. Except the only thing is that it does belong to the government. So all your emails and everything is open to the public. So that means that it's really not private at all. So it's open to everyone. Next, we're going to be talking about the school board and city council members and how they get a lot of emails regarding meetings, agendas, important documents like budgets, and also messages from the people that they serve, such as school district families and city residents. If you guys have any questions at all, or if I'm going too fast, please let me know. I will slow down a little bit for y'all. Now we're going to be talking about spreadsheets. So spreadsheets are used to organize a lot of different information, especially numbers like the school district budget and the city budget. So if you love math, you love spreadsheets. If you are not the biggest fan of math, you're gonna struggle a little bit maybe at first, but everybody can learn them. There's a lot of resources, and like I said, anybody can learn it. Spreadsheets is something that everyone can learn about and become better at. There's a lot of potential when it comes to spreadsheets. And if you don't understand them, this is something that you can just ask about. The school district staff and the city staff can explain anything that you need to know, because that is their job. So feel free to ask anything that you need to know. And like before, there are free classes at the library, and on YouTube, there's a lot of videos that you can look up. And like we said before, there's a lot of people in your community that know a lot of things and might be able to share some tips. All right, next, we're going to be talking about files and documents, also known as PDFs. A lot of important documents like meeting agendas, letters, bylaws, regulations, ordinances, and other things, when those things and those documents are electronic, they usually come in the form of a PDF. And what PDF stands for, it means printable format document. All that really means is that those documents, when they come in, it'll be easy to print them out. But you don't necessarily have to print them out. If you can read them on your computer screen and you're okay with that, it is not necessary to print them out. But when they do come in the form PDF, that's what that means.
Good question. Can you edit on PDFs, or do you have to go into a different?
So usually when you get a PDF form, you can't edit on it directly right away. But there's ways of importing into Adobe Acrobat, or you can also export it as a document on your Google Drive. If you use Google Drive, export it onto Word, since you're going to be using Microsoft Windows. And then once you export it, you can either make a copy, or then you can edit directly on it and then make any changes that you can. And then you can either export it back into a PDF if you want to email it back to anybody, or yeah, you can just edit there directly or print it out as a document from there. All right. Next, with you guys, I want to share some key websites. So right here, I have a list of 6 key websites. So I'm going to give you guys a chance to write them down, take a screenshot, take a picture, do what you guys need to do. These are websites that you will be looking into either in the near future, or they're just really important resources to have, and they're important to know about. So like I said, do what you need to do with this real quick, and then I will take you guys to each website. That way, when you guys go home, you can be like, yep, that's the site that Naomi showed me, and you can just remember that.
I have a question.
Yes.
So how come these 6 websites are the most important? Like, what kind of information can you find on them?
Let's see. So let me walk you through them really quickly, and that way you can look at like their main menu, and you can just see what like each one has to offer. But overall, these are gonna be like your more resourceful resources, in my opinion, where you can get like updated events, updated links, updated, just the most updated information. Let me pause sharing quickly. Now I'm gonna do everybody can see my screen again.
Yes.
So the first key website that I'm gonna show you guys, it's the Sheridan School District. So this is what the website looks like. Here you can find different departments. You can look at the administration and all the different departments that the school district has. And then more specifically, you can go into the school that you want to look into. If you have a kid that goes to the school, if you're just interested in one more specifically, you can just go to there directly. And then when it comes to Board of Education, you can access it right here. Yes, sorry. Here are all the board agendas, all the school board minutes, which you guys will be a part of if you will join the school board. And then here are all the board members as of right now. And as you can see, there's just a lot of quick resources that you can access: the calendar, the technology support, community resources, COVID updates. And that's all just from the Sheridan School District website. So that's your first one to keep in mind. Next, we're going to be talking about the City of Sheridan website. So when you click on that website or you type it into your web address, this is what's going to pop up. Personally, I'm on here all the time. And here you can click on our community and look through anything that you want to know about it before, and all the utilities, schools, library, transportation, and information about that. You can go to stuff specific for residents. And then here in government, you can click all of the resources that might be more specific to you, all the human resources and public safety stuff, all the city card stuff. The ward map is on there. Any FAQs, like if you have any questions, a lot of the time that you might be able to find it right here under public works. So if you have a question or anything that you want to look up about the city, I recommend you type it in here on the search bar, and everything on their website that is that corresponds to that thing that you're looking for will pop up. And this is all City of Sheridan information. Yeah, the first thing you'll see is our Sheridan News. It's a great resource. It's a great resource for Sheridan News. Next, I will be showing you guys the Arapahoe Library's website for the Sheridan Public Library. And this is what pops up when you click on that. It'll give you the address, its hours, and different facilities. And once you click on a specific facility and anything that you need to know, you can click on there. You'll get a lot of news here as well, activities, information, the events down here. This is a great resource if you're ever looking for an activity during the summer, like reading. If you are looking for trainings, Arapahoe Library is the Sheridan Public Library. It's a great resource. Next, I will be going to the South Suburban Parks and Recs website for the Sheridan Recreation Center. Here, you can see a lot of the different activities and admission costs and information needed for the rec center. You can see the schedules, any your order for the summer, look through all that. But more specifically, once you are part of the city council or school board, it's a great resource to find out what's going on. Next, we have the Sheridan Health Services website. I know many of you guys are aware that Sheridan Health Services is always providing a lot of services, such as COVID vaccines, and etc. And here's a great website to find any information that you might be wondering about them. They also have an FAQ. You can set up appointments and look at all the information that they might be updating on. So this is a great resource for that. And then last but not least, we'll be going over the Facebook for Sheridan Rising Together for Equity. If it's actually the seamless in Sheridan, So if you look it up, that's what you want to look up, the seamless in Sheridan. That's a great resource to get in contact with us specifically, Sheridan Rising. We post a lot of updates there. We post about the food bank, we post about these trainings, we post about other trainings that we have, not just specifically related to elections. So this is also a great resource to get information about our community and the city overall and what's going on. So those are the 6 websites that I wanted to share with you guys. Like I said, just take a quick screenshot if you need, and resources are always available on these websites. So make sure you check them out if you ever need anything. There might be something that you don't know about that might pop out on those websites. So it's a great resource even if you don't decide to go into school board or city council. Next, and last but not least, is Zoom and Microsoft Teams. So what these are, both of these are online tools that are used for the same purpose, video meetings. So all the school board and city council meetings are open to the public and they can be accessed through Zoom and Microsoft Teams. It's really accessible to a lot of people going through Zoom and Microsoft Teams. So that's why they have it through Microsoft Teams and Zooms. A lot of people sometimes complain about video calls because you can't see that person face to face, or there's a lot of technology issues from interpretation, getting it started, or somebody's mic doesn't work, or the camera isn't working, or the Wi-Fi is being a little bit weird. Like there's a lot of technology issues that come with it, but we gotta remember the pros. We are also able to connect with people that we're not able to be with physically. And it's really handy dandy, especially like during the pandemic, we were able to connect with all these people that we weren't able to meet up with for COVID reasons. And it's also much easier to attend meetings if you don't have any transportation, you can't make it there for any reason, you don't have childcare or anything like that, etc. So we just got to keep in mind that video calls are they're a great thing to have in our lives, but they're also kind of iffy. We just got to remember the pros when that comes to it. And that was it for the presentation for you guys. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, then
That was such a good presentation. Yeah. Like, thank you so much.
Nice
Super
job.
informative. Super informative.
Concise.
Do we have any questions from people on Zoom, or people in the room? It was so good.
thank you so much, guys. I will pass it on.
All right, hi everyone. You probably can't see me on the video. You can see the top of my head. Hi, I'm sitting really close to the screen. My name is Kealohi and I'm doing some of the technology stuff right here behind the scenes to help make this happen. But I will also be presenting on Robert's rules. So I'm going to share my screen really quickly. So Robert's rules is a very interesting set of rules, I suppose, that helps you guide a meeting. So have y'all ever been inside of a meeting and there isn't really a whole lot of direction or rules on like who gets to speak when, or what are we talking about at the moment? And sometimes the topic can just jump from one place to another without actually setting any kind of action items. So Robert's rules came into existence in order to help give structure and ensure that meetings can move smoothly with some sort of order to them. So I'm going to share. Can everyone see this? Yes. Okay, cool. So this is a simplified version. There are lots of rules. And many people find it very difficult, and even myself find it very difficult to use because there's a certain way that you have to say things in order for them to be considered a part of the rules. So the most important things to remember are these guiding principles right here. So everyone has the right to participate if they want to, before anyone may speak a second time. So that makes sure that it's equitable and that we all have a chance to say what's on our mind without getting cut off, or to make sure that people aren't taking up more space than someone else. It also ensures that we all know what's going on at all time. Sometimes there's a lot of really important things that come up, but it's important these rules make sure that you can't interrupt the speaker at the moment and that we stay on topic in an orderly fashion. So another thing to remember is that only one thing can be discussed at a time, which goes back into how equitable is the conversation, to make sure that we're keeping an equal amount of time for different topics and making sure that everyone is heard. So the most basic way of talking within Robert's rules is a motion. So in order to say anything, you need to make a motion for it. So for example, they wrote down, I move that we add a coffee break to this meeting. So after this is being recognized by someone, usually there's one person who's decided to be the moderator or the leader, and they're basically the person who makes sure that everyone gets the chance to speak. So you're making this motion, and it's like, who's going to be answering it? It's going to be the person in charge. So I'm not entirely sure who it would be on school board or on the city council. I assume it would be the mayor, but I'm not sure how they would typically do that. So that would be a question that we can ask to them and include in our follow-up email with all this information. So now that we know that emotion is the way that you are heard and the way that you carry the conversation, let's talk about a little bit of what that means. So in here it says emotion requires a second to be considered. If there is no second, the matter is not considered. So what a second is, so I'll say, I move that we add a coffee break to this meeting. So someone else in the room, like Damar, would have to say, I second that motion. And so this basically means that more than one person in the room agrees that we should talk about it. It just means that, okay, it's not just me who wants to talk about having coffee. Everyone else in this room does, and we all have the chance to speak on whether or not we want to add that coffee break. And so here's a little information about how to do things and how you can use Robert rules. So if you want to bring up a new idea before the group, you bring up a motion. And after being recognized by the chairperson or the president of that board, and the second is said, or someone else says that they second your motion, then you can start talking about it and everyone can say, I motion to say that I don't want coffee on here because it'll take too much time to make coffee, something like that. And it'll just basically get the conversation going. The next thing that you should know is that you want to change some of the wording in a motion under discussion. So once it's being heard and we're all talking about whether or not we want to add coffee, someone else can say, I motion to add words to it. So you can say, I motion to have coffee because it's an important part of the day. And so someone can say that, or you can say, I motion to take out important part of the day and say it's important part of life. And so it really is just all about the way that you're carrying the conversation and whether or not you want to include that in your official board meetings and procedures or rules. They do this a lot, especially when it's very important a lot when you are deciding on laws that are going on, because when it comes down to the wording of certain things, it can mean very different, have very different outcomes really. And so a lot of times Robert's rule seems very nitpicky and like very specific, like why are we talking about things all the way down to just the words? But it can all just be interpreted very differently, because once that school board or city council board leaves and it's a completely new table, they can interpret it as something completely different and be like, well, they said that coffee is an important part of life, so we need to have it at every single event, every single time we meet, you know, and it can just be interpreted differently. The next thing that you can do with Robert's rules is if you like the idea of a motion being discussed, but you need to reword it beyond just that simple word change, you would move to substitute your motion for the original motion. If it is seconded, discussion will continue on both motions and eventually the body will vote on which motion they prefer. So for example, going again with that coffee is a part of life versus coffee is an important part of the day. We can have a conversation on both at the same time and you can say, well, I like it because XYZ, whatever your reason is. And someone else can say, I like it because of this. And so at the end of this whole discussion, once everyone gets a chance to speak, you say, okay, well, let's vote. Which one do you want? And so it makes sure that number one, everyone is heard in this discussion. And number two, it's equal. Everyone has an equal chance to hear different points of view so that they can vote in the way that fits the group the best. The next thing that you can do is you can request to learn more about this idea or what it is that you're researching or what it is that you're trying to get past. So you would say, I motion for this to move to a committee. So let's say that there's a committee about lifestyle changes or something of that matter. And so you can say, well, we refer that this committee should go to them because coffee, it has to do with life and your daily matter and health. And so this specific conversation should be decided by people who know what they're talking about. So if we think about Danny's conversation and teaching us how to do budgets, you can say, I move to refer this budget discussion to the budget committee. And so people who are qualified and have all of their information on the table and can give you more information about it, you all can come back together the next meeting and say, okay, well, this is what the committee thinks, and we can move forward based on the information that they're bringing forward, and we can have a more informed discussion about it. Another one is to move to postpone for a definite time or date. So this means that you're not ready to vote on that same day. So this is like setting a boundary pretty much and saying, I need more time to think about it. Next meeting, we'll talk about voting. And this is a really great way, especially as an elected official, if it's a law or a decision that'll impact the people in your city, the people in your area, it's a good way to find time within that next week period or however long 2-week period that you request to gather that information so that you can represent them properly. Another one is to limit the debate to a set time or a set number of speakers. However, this requires a 2/3 vote. And so let's say this conversation about coffee is 3 hours long. And you're like, okay, this is too much. Coffee is not this important. And so you say, let's limit this to another 30 minutes. And after that, we need to move on. And so the 2/3 vote requires that 2 out of 3 people in the room would have, or 2/3 percentage, I guess. I guess it's a fraction, so I'm not good with math. I don't know. But pretty much, let's say there's 3 people in the room, 2 of them have to agree to that set amount of time. And let's say you've heard enough of this discussion and you're like, it's the end of the night, it's 9 o'clock, I need to go home and feed my kids. You can motion to close the debate and just request that this conversation is over. This is also referred to as calling the question. So this cuts off the discussion and it ensures that you can vote at the end once you request to close the debate. So let's say that you've had enough of this discussion, but you're not ready to vote. Does anyone know what out of the ones that we've talked about you would refer to? Yeah, so let's say you've heard enough of the discussion, it's late at night, you want to go home, but you're not ready to vote on it yet. What would you motion to do? motion to move the conversation to the next day, continue the conversation. Like in yeah, I see the chat. Dee said move to postpone. You can also do that. So postpone. So yes, you can postpone it and say, let's talk about it next week. Or like Nelly said, you can move it to a different committee and like see someone else to discuss it. Do all motions require a second? I believe so. In order to move into a new motion, you need to have someone else agree with you. With exception to limiting the debate and closing the debate. Those require a 2/3 vote. So that means everyone in the room has to have a say instead of just 2 people who agree. All right. And this one more right here about postponing. You can move to table the motion. So what this means is that the motion will be taken from the table after one item of business has been conducted. If the motion is not taken from the table by the end of the next meeting, it is dead. To kill a motion at the time it is tabled requires a 2/3 vote. Majority is required to table a motion without killing it. So there's a whole lot of killing and tables going on here. That sounds a little dramatic, but what this is pretty much saying is that you don't want this discussion to happen anymore. So let's say you don't want to talk about coffee. You don't want it to be talked about in the next meeting. You don't want it to be talked about in 30 minutes. You can motion to table it. And so everyone has to say yes or no on whether or not we want to continue listening to this conversation. So yeah, that's a pretty good way of saying this conversation does not need to happen anymore. Let's either vote now or move on. So there are many options on how to continue the conversation without feeling limited that you have to keep going back every time someone has something else they want to say. So let's say the conversation just keeps going and going and it's kind of drifted away from the original plan of the day because every meeting comes in with an agenda of some sort of what it is that we want to talk about. And so let's say there's a conversation about coffee, there's a conversation about budgets, meetings, and technology. If we start drifting away from that and you're like, this has been going on too long, we're talking about cookies for some reason and like what we're going to eat for dinner, you can say like, I call for the orders of the day. And it just says, let's talk about the agenda for a second. Okay, we have budget, technology, Robert's rules. We do not need to be talking about coffee or cookies. So let's keep moving forward. The next thing that you can do, we've been in meetings for like 2 or 3 hours at a time, possibly. You can move to take a recess for a set period of time. And this will just make sure that you have a chance to breathe for a second, that you can go outside and take a break from everything that's going on. Sometimes in really intense conversations where people are, the public is voicing their opinions, sometimes city council or school board members might request for a recess, move to a recess because they need a breather to discuss about things. I know we can all probably think of a situation when that has happened where they're just getting grilled or just the fire is lit under them from the community. So sometimes that gives an opportunity for them to talk or to just take a break. And this is probably one of the best ones, move to adjourn. So this means to end the meeting. And if you're ready for the whole meeting to end, the time is up, you say move to adjourn. And usually someone will second it and then you'll be done for the day and you can go home. You can also question the people in charge because it's always good to be critical of the people in charge. Just because they're the person who gets to decide who gets to talk doesn't mean you can't question how they're doing it, how they're calling people. So if you're unsure if they announce the votes correctly, you can call for a division of the House. And so what that will mean that a roll call vote will then be taken. So a roll call vote means they'll go around the whole table. And so let's say we're voting on coffee. We'd say, Naomi, what do you vote for? And you'd say yes or no. And then we go, Damar, what do you vote for? Maria, Nelly, and like it goes on for the entire room. So that ensures that everyone will be getting a chance to talk about why they voted a certain way and what they voted for. I believe that someone else who is technically not a part of the board can also request that a roll call vote be taken, because then, you know, usually it's like you raise your hand if you vote for yes or no. And there's no reason, you don't get to hear why they want it, why they voted for something. And so a roll call vote ensures that you get to hear from everyone and they need to justify it. The next thing is if you're confused about the procedure being used, again, if the chairperson is jumping around, they're not doing things in a certain order, they're adjourning before they take a break, and like, you know, just completely messing up the system and everyone's confused, you have the right to ask point of information or point of parliamentary inquiry, which is a very fancy way of saying, what are you doing? Like, it's just a very simple way of asking, what are we doing right now? What are you talking about right now? And if you ask point of information, it's just asking, can you give me information about what's happening right now? And then everyone will start to clarify the situation and figure out where we're at. Let's say you've changed your mind about something that was voted for early in the meeting, for which you were on the winning side. So you can move to reconsider. And this means that if the majority of votes, majority of the people who voted yes on the bill, the motion can come back on the floor as though the vote has not occurred. So let's say people say you have to have coffee in every single meeting. You can say, well, I think we should reconsider that. And it has to come back on the floor if the majority of people agree that it should be talked about again. And even if, you know, it's not something that everyone wants to bring back up again, there's the right for the majority of people to bring it back up if they don't feel heard. And you want to change an action voted on at an earlier meeting, you can move to rescind, which means that if previous written notice is given, a simple majority is required, which means more than 50%. The simple majority is more than half. And if no notice is given, a 2/3 vote is required. So let's say you don't let people know that you want to rescind that vote, then it changes and it says that 2/3 of the people in the room is required. There's a whole lot more going on at the end of this, which looks a little bit daunting, but this is a quick reference so that it's basically everything we talked about in a little chart. So you can see what has to be seconded, everything needs to be seconded. Certain things are open for discussion and certain things are not. Certain things can be changed or amended and some things cannot. And then this ensures that you know what it is, like how many people have to agree with you in the room in order for it to be passed. How many, or like whether or not this bill or this motion can be reconsidered or rescinded. Yeah, so this, we'll be sure to send this whole document out, and if you do move forward with running, which we hope you all do, you can definitely refer back to this when you're in committee or inside of the sessions with the city council or the school board. And it's just a little cheat sheet. I hope that it was clear enough. There's a whole lot of different motions to ask very simple questions. So we will be sure to send this out. Does anyone have any questions on what I just explained?
Helpful information. I'll be more than ready when I can offer schoolwork.
Mhm.
So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I hope it's not intimidating, you know, because when we're sitting in those committees and they say motion to do this, motion to do that, it's like, what exactly are they talking about? Killing something? Like, why are we tables? What are we talking about? But once you start to look at the cheat sheet and you see that these are very simple words, I mean, very complicated words for simple terms. And this Robert's rules is used internationally. So I learned this when I was in high school because I did Model United Nations, where we studied international policy and discussed and like debated international policy. So this is like something that's used very, very widespread around the world. So if you can get this down, you can have formal conversations. I say that with air quotes, which y'all can't see on camera. But in quote unquote formal settings, because this is usually the default modes of rules for different spaces.
Thank you for sharing that with us. So we have about 7 minutes before we are done with our session for the day. So I would just like to open it up to everybody, see if we have any questions about anything that was presented today about budget, technology, Robert's rules, or any comments at all that people might have. So good if we don't, that would be amazing.
I
Okay.
know, somebody asked in the chat if they could get a copy of this information, so if anybody else wants a copy of any of this information, we're more than happy to send it to them.
And we're sending a follow-up email after this session, which will have all of the documents and all the information that was covered today. So if everybody could just put their email in the group chat and in the Zoom chat, then we'll make sure to send that out. And so if we don't have any more questions, I'd like to move into the closing. So I'm just going to share our flyer very quickly. But before I do that, I would like to give a really big thank you to two of our presenters, to Nahomy and Kealohi. They actually made their presentations today. We had two people who unexpectedly couldn't do their presentations anymore, and so they really hopped on it and created all of this, put it all together in the span of a couple of hours. And so I just like to give them a huge thank you for really stepping up to that role. We wouldn't have been able to do this without them, so thank you both. And so I would love to invite you all to our next session. It will not be next Friday, because if some of you might know, 4th of July weekend. So we're actually going to skip this Friday, and session 3 will be on July 9th, so 2 weeks from now. And in that session, we will be covering personal growth and connecting to self. So that's going to be covering public speaking, self-care, and really delving into self-interest, which is something that we use a lot in Shared and Rising and in other like organizing spaces. So we will have 3 amazing presenters for that session. So we will be in the space as well, and over Zoom too. So I would love to see all of you there. But that is all that we have planned for today. So thank you everybody who attended. Please be sure to drop your email in the chat. Oh yeah, the feedback form. Let me put the feedback form in the chat. I just dropped a feedback form into the chat. If everybody could please take a couple of minutes. You do not have to answer every single question, but the more feedback that we could get, the better our session will be next time. The form is in Spanish, English, and Arabic. There's also a question in there about if the presentation or the session was presented in the language of your heart. So if there's any other language that you would like for these trainings to happen in, please let us know so that we can get interpretation for that. And that is all we have planned for today. So thank you to everybody who joined us, and I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. Thank you, Mira. And I move to adjourn the meeting.
Do I get a second?
Second.
Okay.
Adjourn. Thank you, everybody.